Hey, and welcome to the Drive Your Line podcast. This is where we talk about everything karting, all aspects, chassis, engines, manufacturers, rules, races, series, and so much more. Be sure to come back and listen. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christy Kendall Cox, your host for the Drive Your Line podcast. And today we're kind of running a little bit early in the day. Usually we have these about 5, 6 o'clock during the week. We figured we would try something new so we all could get things done here later in the evening. Plus, our guest always has a very active schedule. So I'm glad this all worked out for him. I want to share a few tidbits of information about the sport and some news that's circulating. Obviously, AKRA Road Racing Series is starting their series in 2 weeks at NC Car. So that's North Carolina's automotive experimental and automotive testing ground, which was originally built by General Motors. If you are not familiar with this particular track, it's very challenging, very technical, and you can find information on that at AKR Racing at akrracing.com. I'm sorry, that complete brain fade. But anyway, also WKA has announced some changes to their schedule. And I guess they have some kind of exciting things that they're going to try and implement or float by and see what the pulse is on everybody. But the few things that I've had shared with me, it does seem like they're kind of trying to steer in the right direction. And I hope to see some other new things come down the pike for them. We like to see fresh ideas coming from WKA. Sprint series are all in high gear. USPKS had their second round this past weekend, and Kart Chaser had complete coverage of that event, including the torrential downpours. They had all the storms that we had here in the South, which, from what I understand, a lot of people are without power still in a few regions. But they were able to get the entire show in for the weekend, and coverage, of course, was phenomenal. Henry and Caleb and everybody, Kart Chaser and Xander all dug in. They even put my son Brandon to work on a camera, which is kind of scary AF, but hey, he pulled it off, right? But I like to see this coverage. Years ago when I was racing, we didn't have this kind of exposure, and it's super exciting to see what the sport has evolved into and the people who have brought their talents to the table to help promote our sport, not only nationally, but worldwide now. So I'm happy to see this happen. I hope that we can possibly bring something to road racing as well. It's hard to do with the super big tracks, the big road courses. It would be virtually impossible to put camera coverage all the way around the facility. But we can definitely showcase the culture of road racing, what happens in the pits, the difference between the carts, showing racers what most of them never even really seen a laydown up close. So if we're going to help bolster our laydown numbers, we need to start exposing these people to and providing them opportunities to get in a laydown. Alan provided that for Rhett Thomas and the B stock, and he's kind of taken to it extremely well and looks forward to getting in it again. So we hope to be able to put that together. If there's anybody out there with a laydown, please let me know. If you're interested in letting some kid get into the cart or providing a arrive and drive at a good rate, let's talk about that and get that dialogue going, and maybe we can help grow the sport a little bit. Stars Championship Series, they have started their year, again, starting in Charlotte. Next event is at Newcastle. After that, they'll be going to a brand new track, AJ Fox's track in Salem, Ohio, and that's Quaker City Drag Strip, which is now Quaker City Raceway. And that's a brand new sprint track for the series and for the region. And they also have another new track in Lorain, Ohio. I don't believe they're doing any on-track activities there yet, but they are forthcoming. And then Stars will conclude once again at Fight Night at Trackhouse. It changes names, so I keep forgetting which one to use, but Trackhouse in Mooresville, and that's always an exciting event and very well attended. AKRA also helps with the Midwest Road Racing Series out there with Kelly Reed and fans. You still have Kart. There's also Southern Kart Club, and there's Woodbridge Kart Club as well as Dart Kart. So be sure, as road racers, you guys also support all of those series. tonight's guest, I remember Brandon when he was a young man in enduros, and he and his family go back a few generations. And it's always nice to see fathers who bring their sons that also create a new niche for themselves outside of karting. And I think Brandon definitely encompasses all of that when it comes to a racer. He's done karting, he's done laydowns, he became an engineer, and now he is in his current role. We're going to talk about that in great depth, but he is an engineer for Penske Porsche and their IMSA team. And we're going to go ahead and welcome Brandon Fry.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Thank you for accepting. I know that your schedule is far more hectic than mine. And as we talked right before we got started, you moved from Indianapolis to Charlotte, or in that area, Mooresville. And that is where Penske's operations are they not?
Yes. Yep.
So, and you've been in Indianapolis for how many years prior to that?
I moved to Indianapolis in 2001. So 24 years. Yeah. Before we moved down to North Carolina at the start of last year.
So Brandon, let's talk about how you got started in karting.
Okay. So my dad and grandfather and uncle raced before, well before I was born. My dad started racing karts when he was 12. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was, always built engines and worked around karting. He was an IKF governor and that sort of thing. And then dad and uncle both, like I said, race go-karts. My earliest memories are going to the kart track with them road racing. And, in the sort of, for me, I was born in 77. So, earliest memories are in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, going to the kart track and just, and road racing all over the country. So, we lived in Dallas for a while, but we would travel, and hit all the major races, Road America, Daytona, on and on. And so and actually the earliest memories of that are going to the track. I remember we had a Suburban, and we didn't have a trailer for a while, and so my dad made this sort of plywood table that we would put the cart under, and my brother and sister and I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and the five of us, the family, would travel across the country with us sitting on this plywood, had carpet on the top table as we drove across the country. Stuff that you'd never do today, right?
Oh,
but
no.
but we did that for many years. When we were younger, going to the kart track, and my parents would probably would drive through the night, and so one of them would climb back and lay down next to us and sleep while we were headed to the tracks. And then my dad, when sort of my brother and sister and I when we were sort of in elementary school, got out of karting for a couple of years, just because we were busy with other sports, the family, and so then got back in starting in the early 90s and got a sprint kart again, and then we switched back to road racing and did that. And then my brother and I started joining him racing in the mid 90s. So that's kind of when we started and started with sprint, a little bit of sprint racing, but mostly road racing.
So for those of you who are just now catching up with us, hi, Derek. I see you. You guys can creep, but you can't hide. I'm just going to read through your bio here real quick. Earliest memories from the racetrack, including crewing for my dad in the 80s and 90s, or going to an IndyCar race, NASCAR, IMSA, to race or spectate. Then we did Enduro's road racing, sprint karts from 95 to 2013. One Daytona Kart Week road race multiple times, as well as WK and WK National and Regional road races. Started working for IMSA during the summer of 1996 while in college. Graduated from Southern Tech, and you graduated as an engineer, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Working in kart series in 2001. We're going to go through all of this during our discussion. And that career started in 2001, and 24 years later, would you change anything?
No, I'm having a blast. I love it.
I know
not
it
a
put
thing.
you on the road a lot, as a
It
kid.
does.
When did you decide as a driver, going to the track with your family and just having fun karting, I wanna do this for my career. This is what I wanna do with my life.
So I think ever since I was a little kid, I've wanted to work in racing in some form. I mean, my initially I wanted to be a driver. That was my my dream. And at some point, my dad said to me, "Well, you're not good enough, and I'm not wealthy enough that we're going to make this dream
Yeah.
happen. So you need to figure out what else you want to do." And so I said, "Okay, well, if I can't do that, I think I want to, I kind of learned a little bit about how race teams work. And I said, I want to be a race engineer. I want to work with the driver and see if, I can help with the setup and make the car faster." So, that was probably late in high school that we kind of came to that conclusion or that realization. So,
So, when you were in school, did you ever have the opportunity? I know some of these schools now have a motorsports team,
mhm.
or, Purdue has the Purdue Grand Prix. They
Yep.
have experimental, motorcraft. Were you involved in any of those type of programs in school?
A little bit. The school I went to had an FSAE program, and so I did that.
Hello?
Did you lose me?
There he is. He
Okay.
unfroze. Okay,
So,
so did you, when you were in school, did you have any of the programs similar to the Purdue
yep.
Grand Prix motorsports programs? Were you involved in those when you were in college or high school?
Yeah. So in college, they had an FSAE program. So build the little open wheel race car. I did do that a little bit, but quite honestly, that was when we were doing a lot of road racing. Sort of the mid '90s to early 2000, type thing, or really mid '90s to 2000 when I graduated. We were doing the WK national championship. We would do dark kart club races. We do CES. Big South Series was big back then. We'd do Woodbridge races. We'd try to get out west to do a kart race or two. So as much as I tried, we to be involved in the FSA program, and I think they're a great program, and I'd certainly recommend them when people come and ask me about them. My I was pretty limited in how much I worked on those programs. The other thing too that happened kind of, so this period is sort of end of high school and in through college. Is like I said, I was busy with racing a lot, and I joined an IMSA team. So the first IMSA team that I worked for was Jim Downing. So Jim Downing is he and his brother-in-law are the guys that came up with the Hans device, right? That
Yep,
saved numerous
numerous
drivers'
lives.
lives, exactly. And he was racing in IMSA and what is now sort of the GTP class, or the top class, the top prototype class. And so my first year in college, the at the end of the first year, summertime came up, and my dad said, "All right, what do you think you're going to do for summer?" And I said, "Well, I've been studying real hard, and we're going to do some go-kart racing." So I said, "Besides studying and taking a little bit of a break from studying, I think I'm going to hang out on the beach and hang out with my friends." And he says, "No,
No, you're not.
you're not going to do that. Let me tell you what you're going to do." He said, "You're gonna write a letter to some local sports car teams, and you're going to tell them you're going to go sweep the floors or whatever they want, and see if you can get a job in racing." And so I did, and Jim was one of the letters that I sent, and he gave me a job, and that was my first job in racing, and I think it worked out well. It was a little bit of I thought my dad was nuts at the
It's
time,
crazy. Yeah.
and certainly disappointed that I wasn't going to be able to hang out and chill out or whatever. But it was probably it was a great start. So
So, if anybody's just now joining in, not everybody's gonna be a driver, right? We all get into the sport and, by goodness, we're all gonna be somebody, right? And then the bills come, and the expectations are far bigger than what the budget is, and that's where the wheat and the shaft part. What is the biggest challenge with kids in karting with wanting to move up as a driver that you see? Because things were a little bit different back in the '80s, '90s, and 2000s, early 2000s, what we see now. Um, what would your advice be to a child that's in karting currently, or a family?
Well, I mean, I think, as you said, I think there's a lot of people that started out as I did and want to be a race car driver. And over my career, I've seen a lot of guys come through that were incredibly talented, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out for them, and it's a shame, that it didn't. But then I think, it's good to what is the next opportunity that you're looking for if you can't make it as a driver, if that doesn't work out, because um a lot of times it's not because of the talent. There's a lot
Right.
of great, very talented people, but I mean, and sometimes it's a money thing, certainly, but not always is it even a money thing. It's just the situation doesn't work out. There are kids that have gone that have run Indy cars that have had short careers that I think, man, that guy was really good, and he deserves another shot, but it just didn't work out for him. So it's a difficult business, type thing, especially for a driver. So then you have to decide, what do you want to do? Is there something else you want to do, or do you want to go do there's a totally different career, that you want to be involved in? And for me, you know, um, from when I was young, I wanted to find a way to work in racing. I really enjoyed it, and and it's been a rewarding career for me. So I'm glad I did.
So, when you transitioned from karting to college to where you are today, were there any growing pains? Were there any of the, will I find a job? Will I
Sure.
be employed by a good team?
Yep.
Um, and obviously as you get further along in your career, your skill set obviously helps you get into some pretty big doors, right?
Yep. Yep.
Who was the most helpful, I guess, is the question, leading up to where you are today?
Well, I mean, I would go back to that conversation I had with my dad, where he said, "You're going to go sweep floors." I mean, in the end, for sure, I never knew if I would be able to have a career in racing, or if I was going to, go get an engineering degree and end up, working in a cubicle designing widgets or whatever, type
Yeah.
thing. So, but then from that, and this is something that I think is, I try to tell young engineers whenever they talk to me about working in racing is, it's a small business, right? So, um, the people you work with and the work you do can help you as a springboard to doing bigger things or other things or whatever. So for example, that Jim Downing position that I had, he made it very clear to me, and this is one thing that I see often as a stumbling block for young engineers, or young people just wanting to work in racing. He said to me, "Look, I've got a role for you. You're going to sweep the floors. You're going to take apart the car. You're going to clean the car, that sort of stuff. But you're probably not going to go to the racetrack. No problem." Now, eventually, I did. I worked with him for multiple summers, and eventually, I did go to the track with him, and that was kind of cool. But then he sold a car to someone else, and also keep in mind, I'm studying to be an engineer, but at this time, but I'm just I'm cleaning the car, for him, and doing, and I'm taking apart brakes, which is those are all great things to get a fundamental skill set of how race cars work and that sort of stuff. But I'm not using any of my engineering things that I've learned. But nonetheless, I continued and I enjoyed that. And he sold a car to another team, another group that wanted to run it, and they said, "Hey, why don't you come do data for us?" And so I went there and I did data for a year for them. Then another team with Hi, Alan. then another team that the crew chief from Jim Downing's had moved to said, "Hey, we need a guy to do data," and they had a newer car, and they were fighting for wins, and so they said, "Hey, we're looking for a guy to do data," and this is my final year at college, and so I joined them, and that team. This takes me all the way to IndyCar. That team, for a short period of time, had a guy that was with Lola Cars that had sold the car, and he was moving to Herdez Competition, an IndyCar team. And so I worked with him. The overlap was only a couple races, and he went to Herdez. And at the end of the year, I said, "Hey, I graduated. I'd love to come work in Indy cars. Is there any opportunity?" And I got a job there. So basically, my point is, the first 4 jobs I had were all, well, after the initial job with Jim Downing, all the next jobs were stepping stones from that first job. And it's just because I'd done a job that, I worked well with these guys. They liked working with me. I showed some, I was competent and didn't screw around. And so that's how I moved on. So I think that's, the big part is getting yourself, get in the door and then work hard and opportunities come, type thing.
So as I'm reading through your bio that you sent me, thank you. It's very detailed. I love this. Starting in a 25-year career in professional motorsports, working for teams including Penske, Ganassi, Rahal, Forsyth, Muscle Milk Pickett, among others. How does it feel when you get so ingrained with a group of people on a team and you work together and you click, and then you move on to the next team? That's part of the equation now, isn't it?
It is. I mean, on one hand, I'd say, over my career, I've got a lot of really good friends in the paddock, and I've worked with a lot of people that I would call friends and that sort of stuff. But you also have the business side of it, right? Yeah. And so sometimes things work with teams or don't work, or teams come and go. There's been a lot of teams that I've worked with over my career that, for various reasons, they've closed up or moved, to a different series or whatever. So yeah, it's certainly, when you have a good group that you're working with, you certainly enjoy that. But, a lot of things, people come and go and things change, so
to add to that bio, fortunate to work with champ car drivers, Michael Jourdain, Mario Dominguez, AJ Allmendinger. If you guys were around in the 1990s, we all remember the Dinger. Justin Wilson, amazing talent. Will Power, Paul Tracy, as well as IndyCar drivers Alex Tagliani, Max Chilton, Christian Lundgaard, Santino Ferrucci, another go-kart kid, Oliver Askew, and IMSA drivers Klaus Graf, Greg Pickett, Lucas Luhr, Romain Domas. I mean, it's like a who's who. Dane Cameron, Felipe Masser. It's a who's who of everybody in every series. That's impressive. That's like the Academy Awards of drivers and teams right there.
I've definitely been very fortunate.
Tell me what let's say IMSA. Okay, so we're all road racers. I tell people all the time I'm a road racer by DNA. I'm a dirt person by passion, right? How many times have you won the Daytona 24? The teams that you've been on?
The teams I've been on, 4.
Dang. What was the first one?
Twice with Rahal. So. And
now you have one with
2 with Penske.
2 with Penske.
Yeah.
And this is what, your second year with them, right?
Yep.
That's impressive. Championships 2024 GTP, 2013 LMP1, 2012 LMP1 again. Other IMSA and open wheel wins. Wow, competitive in the most prestigious races in the world, including the Indianapolis 500. Tell me about those.
Doing Indy or just
went in Indy?
Yeah, I mean,
Indy, 500 experiences.
It's incredible. It's such an event to be involved in, and it's the whole way you approach it. I tell people Indy qualifying, I mean, you find out it's a 40-second lap or a little bit under, and you find out how many times you can hold your breath for 40 seconds while you're watching the driver go around the track.
It's like that first group of kids at Daytona. Make around.
Yeah. I mean, the drivers out there doing everything because they're on the edge. It's such a great race, and that track, it is IndyCar qualifying at the 500 is just an amazing experience. And so you're riding with them and you're holding your breath and you're watching their steering trace. And if their steering trace gets a little exciting, you do too.
So In some of these events in IndyCar, which ones stand out the most in your mind?
In IndyCar?
Yes.
Um, I mean, the 500 for sure. I mean, that's the big one. I mean, if there's several years ago when I was at Ray Hall, I was on the BMW program, and we had it was sort of the last year of the M8 GT car that we were running. So they only ran 4 races, and so they asked me if I could do the Indy 500 for the third car at Ray Hall, and I said I'd absolutely love to. And then it went, and then it expanded, and we ended up doing 8 races and having a lot of fun and some success, but some level of success. But for me, Indy, I love doing. I would do it in a heartbeat anytime. It's a great race. I mean, it takes a lot of prep and a lot of you want to do it the right way. You don't want to just jump in, but that's an enjoyable run. And then, I mean, I certainly love going to, Road America's an incredible track. I love going there. We're headed to Laguna this weekend. I love going there. Long Beach, so Barber, as they raced last weekend, we don't do that in the sports cars in IMSA, but, that's a great place to go. So, those are probably my favorites.
And would you say that the diversity and scope of your work changes, whether it's IMSA or IndyCar? How do those two parallels look as an engineer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've bounced back a little bit between IndyCar and IMSA over my career, and it's because I enjoy both. I mean, I really love both championships, but I love them for different reasons. IndyCar, what are there, 28 full-time cars right now? I mean, It's just so competitive. Like, you really have to be on top of your game, and it's just such a tight field. And then there's you're working with one driver and doing everything you can to try to to move your car forward and that sort of stuff. The car's relatively tightly regulated. I mean, dampers are a big thing in Indy cars. They do a decent amount of wind tunnel testing to understand the parts they've got, but that's kind of IndyCar racing. And then sports car racing, you have the diversity of, the different cars in the class. So, IMSA racing right now, we've got factory efforts from Porsche that we're involved with, BMW, Cadillac, Acura, or HPD, Lamborghini joined us for a few races, Aston Martin. So you have, different cars that have different sort of strengths and weaknesses. And I really enjoy that sort of the fact that, hey, this track will suit my car, but then another track it won't suit it. And so how do we try to overcome that and make sure that we have good races across the series. The technology in the GTP cars, it's a hybrid, which the IndyCar is as well. But the IndyCar, they very much want the driver to control everything, whereas which is fine. That's what the sport is about. It's about the driver. Sports car racing, it's more. There's a lot of systems going on in the background, so you can be really clever and really help, from an engineering standpoint, and kind of help improve the competitiveness or the performance of the car. So I think that's on the one side, the pure competition. Not to say that there's not pure competition in IMSA, but the 28 cars and the really tight fields. That's what those are the things that I love about IndyCar. And then the IMSA weekends, it's more of an event in how you manage the two drivers and what are their strengths and weaknesses, and how can you play that to improve your success and that sort of stuff. So I enjoy both.
In your capacity, how would you describe the atmosphere of the two realms, IndyCar to IMSA? I know that IMSA right now is seeing huge surge in popularity. And so is IndyCar. IndyCar is seeing a really impressive rebirth. What would you say is the biggest difference between those two atmospheres on race day?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, it's tough. I think they're both doing really, really well. I mean, the IMSA races. I mean, I try to an RV and my family come and stuff like that. And it's gotten harder and harder for me to take my RV to races because they're all selling out. They do a great grid walk before the race where, anybody can walk out on the grid and see the cars and that sort of stuff. And so, I mean, attendance seems to be booming. And I think the thing that IMSA sort of lends itself to is because generally the races are longer, it becomes more of a weekend event. And so, people will, a 12-hour race, you can watch the start of the race. You can go back, cook some hamburgers for lunch, and then go watch some more race, go cook, grill out some steaks for dinner, and then watch the end of the race. So I think, it's very, that's sort of the atmosphere, and it's enjoyable that way. You go to an IndyCar race and it's going to be a 2-hour race. And so it's pretty intense for 2 hours. And again, like you said, the crowds have been really, really good. So I think both are doing well. I think generally in motorsports, I would say it seems like right now is a good time to be working in motorsports.
Yeah. So where's your next stop? Where do you go to next? You're going to Laguna, correct?
Yep.
And tell me about the track. I've been to Laguna. It's really cool. Tell me what your aspects of that track are your favorite.
Well, so Laguna was repaved last year. So it had gotten, prior to the repaving, Laguna, it doesn't have any sort of very long straight. So it's all a lot of like these sweeping corners and a lot of elevation change.
Oh yeah.
And so it had gotten to where it was very low grip. And so it was really challenging. Tire deg was a big thing. And so, how long could you hang on before switching the tires and that sort of thing. Now with the repave, the place is super smooth and tire deg is still certainly a problem, but it's not the problem that it was before. And so it kind of just changes the way you race, the way the race runs. The place, the sand blows on the track, because it's windy and like I said, there's a lot of elevation. So it's a great track to come race. It's a great track to watch. I mean, for a spectator, you can see probably 2/3 of the track, depending on where you are. So yeah, it's a good event and I enjoy it. It's generally a little on the cool side. So I think when I looked the other day, I think we were in the mid 60s every day. So, yeah.
What's your favorite track?
Favorite track? That's a toughie. I don't know that I have a favorite track. I have a lot of tracks that I enjoy for different things. So if you ask me my favorite track to engineer, it'd be Sebring. And the reason why is because it's just so difficult.
It's brutal.
It's brutal. It's nasty. So I think if you can, if you have a fast car at Sebring from an engineering standpoint, you've done something, right? Because it's just so challenging. It's bumpy. It's high speed corners. It's slow corners. It's, medium length straights. It's just it's a really difficult, and it changes. Like, the way the track is at 10 o'clock is going to be different than it's going to be at 4 o'clock. So that's probably my favorite in terms of engineering a car. I don't know that I really enjoy visiting Sebring. I enjoy the 20, Daytona 24-hour. That's a great race. Road Atlanta for Petit Le Mans. That's a great race. I enjoy those two. I'm going to Le Mans this year. I've been several times in the past. That's such a huge event. And it's got a lot of, different challenges, it's such a long track and a lot of things to sort of make sure you get right over a 24-hour race. And then like we talked about, I mean, I love Indy. The Indy it seems pretty simple, but because it's 4 corners and they're all the same and that sort of stuff. But I mean, getting everything just right for those 4 corners, is pretty difficult. So, and then just to visit, I think Road America, I mean, it's such a beautiful, beautiful facility. They've done a great job. Like every time you go to Road America, they've made some upgrade and it's nicer than it was the last time we were there. So, really, really enjoy that.
So in your karting career, what was your favorite sprint track?
Sprint track. I didn't do a whole lot of sprint racing, but probably I enjoyed running at Jacksonville, 103rd Street. I enjoyed Charlotte, the track
North American Championship.
And AKC, yep.
Yeah,
yep,
those would be So WKA, Mike, Kevin, if you're listening, we would love to see the North American Championships come back. I know that
Yeah.
that's like not going to happen, but gosh, those were killer events. And then the Briggs and Stratton 300 afterwards,
Yep. Yep.
racing in between. Yeah, it was a festival.
It was
Okay.
a great showcase for racing,
Oh God,
for
yeah.
karting, I
So
mean, for me back then, real quick, Daytona and NAKC at Charlotte, those were the two, big races, right?
yeah,
That
those
really
were those
were
were it.
showcases.
Of all the karts you've driven, which ones were your favorites?
I loved the controlled road race carts. So I ran John Klutz's JK1 chassis, or so one of his first versions of his road race chassis with the Pirelli Rejet. Those were fun. I think Daytona, I want to say it was about 130 miles an hour. A lot of fun.
Let's see. Your history in karting obviously goes over many years, and we just talked right before we went live. Your dad, Jim, at 75 years old, is still competing in sprint races.
Yep.
That's amazing. And I know when we saw you a few years back at the Roar, he was working on the same team you were
Yep.
at Daytona.
Yep.
So what is he doing now?
He's retired, but like retired for him means, that he's got to stay
really
super active. Exactly. So yeah, in February he turned 75. He cycles a lot. So he's got a mountain bike and a road bike, and he rides his bike a lot just to stay in shape. And then every once in a while, he'll have a buddy that says, "Hey, come do a sprint race with me," and he'll go and do it. He ran for TS up until I want to say about 2 years ago, and then my mom convinced him. His wife convinced him to retire, and we were done. He was done racing, and that lasted until someone else said, "Hey, why don't you jump in the car and race with me?"
Sure, let me grab my helmet bag. I'll be right back.
Exactly. So he still does that. He tells everybody he's not racing anymore, but I think if you look at the calendar, he's got a few races in each year.
I believe his social media said the other day he was going to CK&A.
Yes.
For the master's class.
Exactly.
God love him, I tell you. Okay, here now we got the silly stuff. Your favorite vacation?
Favorite vacation destination? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I love traveling. I mean, and that's something that I got through, being young and karting. So, I've been fortunate to travel all over the country with my family. Probably love traveling out to like Colorado and Utah and some of the national parks out there.
Those wide open spaces.
Exactly.
How many different karting classes have you participated in? Do you know?
It's a good question. I mean, mostly I've run Yamaha stuff, the pipe and Sportsman and Can and all that sort of stuff. I ran controlled for a couple of years. I ran 125 shifters. I had a Honda CR 125. I ran a little bit.
And there were some pretty good battles between you and Adam Sedano.
I enjoyed the 125s for a while. Yeah. A little bit of four-stroke stuff with my dad. He drugged me out to some CK and A races. So I've done a little bit of that. So
awesome. Yeah. Would you ever consider going back to karting? Granted, time permitting.
Sure. Yeah, I think about it all the time for sure. And how much I'd love to do it. I think the thing for me is, like you said, the time thing. Is if I was going to do it, I'd want to do it, make sure I did it right, and so that takes a big time commitment, type thing. So,
ooh, here's a good question. It must be from Kelly Reed. What's your most memorable race with your dad?
With my dad and brother, right? Yeah.
Family affair.
Family affair. Well, I think one of the coolest. I don't know if it was the most memorable because of the outcome, but one of the coolest for us was we finished first, second, and third at Daytona. So we had the whole podium at Daytona. Lance won the race. I finished second.
Go ahead and show Dad was third. First slide real quick. So I do have slides. We got so engrossed in adding all this stuff. Tell us about this picture right here and who's in the seat.
Yeah, so that's me. That was the front page of the Daytona newspaper
Hmm.
when I was 2 years old. My dad getting ready to race. So
Looks like a
yeah,
Panther X.
yeah, probably.
Next slide. Is that the Suburban that there was no
That's
trailer
the
park?
Suburban. Exactly, exactly. So the cart would go under. We would sit on top on the plywood on top, and that's how we went racing. So that's my little brother. So we're sitting in the cart. That was my dad's twin. So he did
Yep.
the Formula 200 series back when Bridgestone Formula 200 back when that was popular. So he did that for
When they would
several
hit the
years.
Cleveland Grand Prix and Long
Yep,
Beach, and oh gosh, those were awesome.
exactly.
Um, let's talk about these 3 pictures.
Yeah. So the I think that so the bottom right is one of the last years of Champ Car. So I engineered Paul Tracy. So I'm standing on the timing stand. That's a pit stop with Paul.
The Chrome Horn
S-
himself.
the Kronhorn himself, exactly. So that was a fun year, adventurous year. I don't know where that is in terms of what track, but yeah. So that was that. Then to the left of it, when I was at Muscle Milk, we were fortunate. We won a lot of races, and I think that that's the victory podium at Lime Rock.
Oh,
So with
nice
Klaus
place.
Croft and Lucas Luhr.
Yep.
Yep. So and then obviously, yeah, now I'm with Penske.
And these are the 3 organizations that you have worked the most in your professional career.
Yep. Yep.
So, it says here for this Mike White, let's see here. I heard Jack Roush say karting was the most fun he'd had in racing. Other forms were just business. Would you agree?
I would say, yeah, well, I think I saw something where Senna said something like karting is the purest form of motorsport.
Mm.
And I would say that that's probably true. I mean, for sure, I enjoy my job and that sort of stuff, but it is business, and that's the the um, the main fundamental. I had a lot of fun growing up racing go karts, and that was kind of you're controlling your own destiny and that sort of stuff, and so it's just it's fun. That's why you do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it, right? Whereas for sure,
Yeah, because
um,
Lord knows it's expensive.
exactly, exactly. Whereas racing, I mean, I love my job. Don't get me wrong, but it is a job. So there's good days and bad days that come with it, and there's a reason why they pay you to go to work, right? So
Yeah, that's exactly right. Mike White wants to know if you had ever run the Purdue Grand Prix.
nope. My dad did. So my dad is a
Ah,
Purdue grad. Yep, and he ran it twice. Won it the second time he ran it. The first time he got knocked off the track while he was leading. So
what the heck?
um, what the
That's just
heck?
wrong.
Exactly, exactly. So
So, and I just want to go over these last few tidbits. Competed in some of the most prestigious races in the world: the Indy 500, 24 Hours of Daytona, 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the Sebring 12 Hour. Tell us about being at Le Mans.
Le Mans. Um, it's an incredible event. I mean, I think it's there's uh, so many. It's a big track, so there's a lot of cars, which means it's tons of fans. I mean, I don't know that outside of Indy and Le Mans are the two where you're like, it's seas of people. Um, it's unique because it's for me. I mean, I've done races outside of the U.S. But this is a big race where there's I don't know the language, so the
There's that
announcer
little barrier.
the announcer, you don't know what exactly he's saying until he gets really excited and starts yelling someone's name that may be familiar. Um, but there's a lot of little things that are different about it. The way they work in their garages and the way the team's set up behind the garages and stuff like that. So it's very I would consider it a very special race. It's unique. It's great to do, and I've done it 4 times before this year, and we'll be heading back over this year. So I'm looking forward to it.
Tell us about working in the Penske organization.
Um, yeah, it's a dream. Obviously, I've grown up, and so uh, around racing, and
He's
you.
Penske's the pinnacle,
It
for
is. It
if
is.
you're
I mean,
looking
all,
in
all
from
the
the
all the
outside, it's like, wow, the
all
captain.
this right. I mean, a few years ago, and I actually I've given this book out to a couple friends. I read the book "The Beast" is what it's called, which is about the Mercedes pushrod engine that they took to Indy and won. And for me, like that book, if you read it, and I remember when I was a kid, I was at Indy that year, sitting in turn one when Al Jr. won, and it just it epitomizes what Penske is all about. How they're looking for every advantage in that they can to be successful, and this is an engine that was developed with Mercedes for one race type thing. So, and obviously, racing has changed and the rules have changed. So we're not developing an engine for one race anymore. But the company, where I work, we have the NASCAR team, the IMSA team, and the IndyCar team all in the same building. I think we're about 500 people. And so there's tons of resources within the building. If we come across a problem, how do we solve this on the IMSA program? There's a guy that I can chat with on the IndyCar program or on the NASCAR program that maybe has a lot of expertise in that area or whatever. So yeah,
Are there more teams going to that multi-team or multi-discipline format where they're all in one location or at least close proximity?
I think so. I mean, when I was at Rahal, the sports car team and the IndyCar team were separated, and during that time, the two teams moved into the same building, and I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a there's a lot of efficiencies from that. It's great for the workforce and that sort of stuff to be all together. So, yeah, I think it's a smart way to do it.
So you've been in Mooresville for a while. You were in Indianapolis for 20 years, 23?
24 years.
And of the two locations, which is your favorite right now?
Well, I love the weather here. I mean, I can
it's
I can
hard
go
to argue
outside.
about that.
Exactly. I like the weather. I think it's great to be close to the mountains here. And we're not too far. I haven't made it to the ocean yet since I've been down here. In terms of while I've lived here, but you're close to the mountain. You're close to the ocean. Where we live we're not too far from Lake Norman, so I'm enjoying it down here. It's a nice place, and Indy's a nice place as well. Where we lived. In Indy. I remember when I first moved there, I met my wife in college and in Georgia, and then we graduated. We moved to Indy, and where we lived, I don't think it wasn't jiving with us, and I took a job in Colorado for a couple of years and worked at Motorsports. So that's when I worked with AJ Allmendinger and Justin Wilson, and we got married. And I took a job coming back to Indy, and I thought to myself, how am I going to convince my wife that we're leaving Colorado? Because we loved it. We skied a lot. We loved the mountains. We loved, how am I going to convince her to come back to Indy? But I did in the end, after, like I said, we had been there for 20 something years, we were, it was difficult to, on one hand, to make the move, but on the other hand, we're enjoying the new home.
So obviously, Alan had to chime in with something. I knew it was coming. How was the Nismo era with front-wheel drive prototype?
That was a lot of work. So that was a role I had for 1 year. That was 2015. I started early in 2015, and the program closed at the end of 2015. And the idea was a front-wheel drive prototype. Front engine, front wheel drive prototype, which is pretty unique. And we went to Le Mans and we ran 3 cars. I engineered the car that survived and finished the race. It was, by the time I started there, the program had been around for about a year, and so most of the fundamentals were there. And so it was, how can we make this thing competitive. And from that standpoint, I mean, like they say, you learn a lot from your failures and your successes. I mean, there was a lot of learning that year. I enjoyed the challenge of trying to make this very unique car, along with the rest of the engineering group, try to make it competitive. So, but it was a lot of work. I think, that was probably the most hours I've probably ever worked in my career. My wife does not remember it near as fondly as I do.
Vividly as you do.
No, she tells me all the time that I generally came home grumpy and very, very infrequent, so.
Not approachable.
Exactly.
Let's see. Okay, so I found out that the Midwest Karting Association was actually Lindsay Reed. And she wants to know, what advice would you give youngsters who want motorsports to be their career path, driver, or engineer?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, first of all, you're racing motorsports, and it doesn't matter if you're racing go-karts or working professionally. It's a lot of work, right? So it's got to be a passion play. It's got to be something that you're completely passionate about. And if that's the case, then just start off with whatever opportunities you can get, and just embrace it and work hard, and opportunities will come. There's a lot of small teams, and even the thing that's gotten more popular in the last whatever decade or so is like Chump Car, or what are they all these other series where you basically take a road going car and put a roll cage in it and just go have fun. And so those teams are always looking for someone to help out and crew for them or whatever. And so the more you can be at the track, whether it's go-karting or some sort of regional or whatever racing, and help out, the more opportunities you're going to get. So I would say that, and I would also say, I mean, and we talked about it a little bit before the show. Right now, racing, all levels of motorsports, all the way up to indoor racing, they need young people to join to do mechanic roles, to do sub-assembly roles, to do truck driver roles, that sort of stuff. I mean, there's so much opportunity there. Before I took the role I was at Penske, it was a slightly different role. It was a little bit more management oriented, running the IMSA program there. And so I was doing a lot more hiring than I do now. And we were desperate for people to come in sort of younger, out of school, sort of junior mechanic roles. And we would take people, that just had a little bit of experience out of a car dealership, or if you were, you came out of karting. When I started in IndyCar racing, you'd never do that. You'd come from an Indy Lights team or something like that. You needed several years of being a mechanic to prove, your experience and that sort of stuff. And now, I mean, they're desperate to add more people. So I think there's tons of opportunity if that's what you want to do. And then, driver to engineer. I mean, the thing I would recommend there, I mean, same sort of deal. There's a lot of information out there between, on your go-kart, you've got a little data system. That's how I started doing data, was on my go-kart. I actually started out, one of the deals I did with my dad when I was in college is I said, hey, I'll live at home for a little while if you buy me a Pi System 1 for my go-kart.
Oh,
so
yes.
Pi first came out. Yep. The Pi System 1. And I think it was I don't know, $1,000 or something like that. And he's
Which was big money back then.
Yeah, he goes, "You're crazy. I'm not buying that." And so the way I convinced him is I said, "Fine, I'll live at home, and so that'll save some money." And he bought me a System 1. And so I literally started, doing data on my go-kart, and that's how my first introduction to data acquisition. So, and now, I mean, Pi System 1 was great in the mid 90s, but I mean, there's so much further advanced. One
that Pete Tire brought to the track.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
What in the hell is that?
Yep.
And 100%. Then he I come back, and the next morning he tells me my braking point, my acceleration point. I mean, it was pretty impressive. I couldn't lie. But now how many sensor points can you monitor on your
Oh,
current?
on our cars, oh,
Yeah.
there's thousands. It's unreal. I mean, between sensors that are on the car and math channels, calculating things off of the sensor. I mean,
Wow.
the amount of data that we get coming off the car is unreal. So
How much does simulators play a part in what you do?
a big part. I mean, before, all the GTP manufacturers have a simulator that they'll send the drivers to before an event. So before we go to a track, you know, in almost every case, those drivers are going to have driven the track. They'll have run through a run plan. They'll be familiar with the track, familiar with what the setup of the car is going to be, and come out of the come out of the gates ready to go because they've already driven it. So I think that's pretty common, certainly in IndyCar and IMSA racing. IMSA racing, because there's less cars. I think, like I said, all the manufacturers will have access to it and will do it. In IndyCar racing, when I was last in IndyCar racing, the drivers would fight for time in the simulators because they could see that the track time has gotten so limited,
Yeah.
in terms of how many laps you get and that sort of stuff that
It's changed the testing field altogether.
it has. Yep.
So Derek Wargo, just to give you a heads up, don't let him be a pain in the butt and monopolize the screen here. His kid's one of our drivers on our team. Is college the way to engineer the engineering field of racing, or let's see, team apprenticeship, like what you've mentioned?
Yeah, I think it depends. If you want to be an engineer on a race team, you want to go and get a college degree. If you want to work on a racing team, certainly starting out young and an apprenticeship is a good way to do it. And for me, I mean, I kind of did a little bit of both, right? Or not a little bit. I got a degree, but also while I was getting a degree, my summers I was working on a race team, and I think for me that served me well. I mean, certainly, I've worked with guys that want an engineering job, and one of my first questions is, do you know how the car works? Have you taken apart, parts on the car and that sort of stuff? And if the answer is no, I mean, it's probably going to be a little bit difficult. It's not to say that they can't do it. That doesn't mean that they're not a smart kid, but it's certainly good to kind of have a feel for how everything works if you're gonna be engineering.
Absolutely. Brandon, I appreciate your time. I would love to do this again. Maybe at the end of your season, we can kind of recap where that path has taken you. If there's one bit of advice that you can give a kid in karting that wants to do something, whether a driver, an engineer, they don't even know where their path is going to be, but they want to be involved in an upper level motorsports team, what would it be?
I think I'd say, just keep pushing, and you never know what'll come around. I mean, in the end, I didn't know how things would turn out for me, and I just tried to take every opportunity as it came and make the most out of it. So and enjoy the ride. My time racing with my dad and brother and that sort of stuff. I mean, those are some of my most enjoyable memories in my life. So enjoy that. That's good time with your family. Generally, karting is, and then whatever comes out of it after that, it is great. But yeah, take whatever. You don't know what opportunities are going to come. So just keep every opportunity you can. Embrace new challenges and take it seriously.
Brandon, I thank you. Tell your
Thank
family
you.
thank you for sharing you with us this evening. We will catch up when you get back from France. I definitely want to hear about Le Mans. I'd love to be able to see the Mulsanne straight. But thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
No problem. Happy to do it. Happy to be here.
Guys, that wraps us up. I got a couple of quickies. Peyton Nelson, happy birthday, buddy. I didn't forget about you. I hope Emily let you watch this. Guys, thank our sponsors, traileralarms.com, Boxo Tool USA, Tillotson Racing, AKRA, best road racing program, the biggest and definitely one of the most popular. And of course, our kart shop, Drive Your Line Kart Sport. Guys, I appreciate you taking the time. If you want to become a sponsor of the Drive Your Line podcast, get a hold of us at driveyourline.com. You'll find a form you can fill out, or Christy at driveyourline.com. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your effort. Till next time, checker flags, friends.